we really appreciate you not ducking that question. That was impressive because this entire show is built on, offering opinions. And Tim and, as far as Tim and I go, no one's asking for ours, but we're giving them all the time. We're giving everybody advice. That's just what we do.
I'm shocked that you guys are giving your opinions. I'm shocked by that.
But after that response, maybe Rob should call you.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee. This is the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, 𝘏𝘅𝗽𝗏𝘁.
And I'm Tim McGhee.
Well, Tim, let's get this out of the way. We are recording this earlier than normal on a week. It's Monday afternoon, June 8th, meaning that by the time this episode publishes, both the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals will be a bit further along. I'm not going to say anything like, the Knicks might be hoisting a Larry O'Brien trophy or anything stupid like that. And FIFA World Cup, of course, kicks off on Thursday, the day this will publish. But again, not important. Tim, what's on your mind?
Well, I think the world is turning its attention to the World Cup, as are we. We haven't talked about it too much. We did obviously have 𝘏𝘁𝗪𝗍𝘏 on a couple of weeks ago, but 104 matches, 48 teams, $9 billion in revenue. Yeah. 6 billion consumer or fan engagements, 3 countries. I would argue that this is the biggest sporting event in the world. It's longer than an Olympic Games. It has more venues than an Olympic Games. It doesn't have as many competitions as the Olympic Games, but I would argue this is the biggest sporting event in the world.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description of it. And with that, of course, comes a lot of the challenges that have posed and things that are going on, of course, in this world right now that I think have had some people concerned. But, overall, I don't think in the end it's going to prevent it from being regarded as just what you said, the biggest thing that's ever happened in the world of sports.
Yeah, I think there's some great storylines. There's some not so great storylines. There was an Iraqi player who was detained for 7 hours. There was somebody in the Iraqi delegation who was not allowed entry into the U.S. I think, that was my concern when we talked about this several months ago. I think your concern was more what goes on at the venues. So we will see what happens. But Mexico, of the 3 host countries, kicks off on Thursday against South Africa, followed by Canada on Friday afternoon against Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then Friday night, the U.S. takes on Paraguay in what, every soccer fan here in America thinks or hopes will be the beginning of a great showing by the U.S. men's national team. They did lose to Germany on Sunday, but they comported themselves well, and Anthony Robinson just had a blast of a goal towards the end of the first half. But they played hard, and we'll see what 𝘏𝘁𝗪𝗏𝘏𝘁, how do you say his name? 𝘏𝘁𝗪𝗏𝘏𝘁? I mean, how he's brought the boys together, so we'll see. I know before we came on the air, you mentioned the flip-flop by FIFA, who first allowed empty water bottles and is now claiming or stating you are not allowed to bring in empty water bottles into the...
Well, but they flip-flopped again. They came back. They
so
did
now
it,
you
but
can.
then put some stipulations on it. And the stipulations are logical. I mean, this was it was a horrible move. It sounded dumb and stupid, and everybody it made it easy for people to point out that it was just a Coca-Cola thing because Coca-Cola controls the water rights. I don't know enough on the inside to know if that was true, but it's plausible that it was a factor. Of course, there are problems with hard-sided water bottles being at a venue. And so that's part of the stipulation that they now can bring them in. They have to be a certain size, they have to be soft-sided, and they can be reusable in Canada and the U.S., not in Mexico, which has been a long-standing rule in Mexico that you can't do that, which I have to think those games are going to be really hot, but and they will here. I mean, the thing that sounded so phony about it is they are instituting an automatic break to make sure that players are hydrated and so forth. So it seemed as though the fans should be taken care of in a pretty broad way. So it just seemed very stupid and tone deaf, and I was happy to see the reversal, but totally get the fact that you need to stipulate what type of bottle can come in. You're not going to want a giant metal Yeti bottle coming in and becoming a projectile.
A weapon.
So,
although I would never throw a Yeti considering how expensive they are.
or some of the other water bottles. That is crazy. We got to talk to our boy Ed Lynch at one point, because I'm sure they're selling a lot of those super expensive water bottles that I'm like, when did water bottles get so expensive? But I guess people love their water bottles. Going back to what you were talking about before, and my thought on, and I think I even predicted that if there was going to be a market where there were going to be protests against it was going to be in LA. I haven't necessarily heard that. However, I have heard, I think, or I just read today, that they are drafting some pretty serious plans about ice in and around MetLife during games being played there. And I don't know what that might create in terms of, counter-protesting or protesting, I guess, against that type of action if it happens.
Okay, so you can't get very close to the stadium anyway, any stadium, because of security barriers, because of security protocols, because of parking, right? I would imagine they will probably ask if you're coming in via car to show a ticket before you're able to pay for parking. And they are causing a problem where one would not otherwise exist.
Trying to round up people that they think are working there and don't have proper... I don't know. It just seems like, why create what everybody is already a little bit on edge about anyway at a time of celebration, unless it's about hitting numbers and things like that. So hopefully...
Why does this administration do a lot of the things they do?
Fair point. One other quick thing I saw, and it was in a blurb in SBJ, but it was an Adweek article that I thought was pretty interesting about... Obviously, we know that the country demographically has changed quite a bit. The Hispanic population has nearly tripled since the last World Cup. And the U.S. is apparently the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, which is pretty fascinating in terms of number of people that consider Spanish their first language. But the ad budgets going to Spanish language television, including on soccer, haven't necessarily. They've increased on a very small percentage. That seemed a little odd. I thought that was an interesting data point that came up through there, because I have to think that Telemundo will do quite well during World Cup in the United States.
No, I think so too. I think there's going to be a fair number of English-speaking viewers who will tune in just to hear Mario Cantor's calls on goals.
Legendary call.
I hope at the end of the day there's nothing that takes away from what a fantastic event this has always been.
We made Eduardo Solis give his pick. And he kind of, he went back and forth a little, right? Understandably, he's got a divided house in his household. You want to venture a guess? I'm going to probably be pretty lame in mine. And I know people are pretty optimistic about that U.S. team, to your point earlier. I don't see it happening, but it would be cool if I was wrong on that.
Well, I would consider it a huge win for American soccer if the men's team gets out of the group stage, which they should be able to do. My pick to win is France.
Good pick. Because not because. I was going to pick Spain, which I know if you pick France, Spain, or maybe Portugal, it's probably not the most bold prediction, but we're predicting who we think is going to win. I say Spain.
Norway might surprise some people. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think they're going to have a good tournament led by Haaland.
Maybe someday, because I tend to pull for Croatia, and I would be pulling also for Italy in addition to the United States. But Italy can't seem to make a freaking World Cup for the life of them. I don't know how that's possible, given their history.
I went to get my hair cut earlier today, which it's a shame I have to wear these headphones because it looks good.
It does look pretty good. I can kind of tell.
Anyway, the woman who cuts my hair is Ecuadorian, and we were talking about the tournament, and she said she had a customer last week or the other day, and they were talking about the World Cup, and she said, well, who are you rooting for? He goes, well, I'm an American, so I'll be rooting for the U.S., but I'm of Italian descent, so I'm going to be rooting for Italy. And she said, well, I almost don't have the heart to tell you.
I know. It's just hard to believe. Like, it really does. It almost makes no sense, given, again, their place, at least in the history of the sport and in World Cups, to not, I don't know how many World Cups it's been, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
Could have looked that up. I'm sure that information is readily available. And I could look it up right now, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for the day for Ireland to get back. And there are some knowledgeable soccer media folks who actually think that England has a chance in this tournament.
Well, I think they theoretically should. I think they're loaded. They're good. but it's not going to happen. I mean, I'm just going to say that right now. I don't. But if they get out of group stage, obviously we'll start hearing the chants of bring it back home, and it's not going to happen. Sorry, I have good friends in England that are obviously fans.
They're almost like pre-2004 Red Sox fans. But
maybe it'll be the year. Maybe I just
the Red Sox broke the curse.
Yes,
there's a great book called Soccernomics, written by two economists / journalists / football fans. And basically what they say is England wins as often as England should win, given the size of the population, given the percentage of players who play, given the strength and size of their first division league and things like that.
Yeah.
But Brits don't want to hear that.
Right. The expectations are they're so misplaced. It's so
64.
It's so out of control. But if they did make a run, I mean, it would be huge because the U.S. numbers would get, because you'd have a ton of people that all of a sudden are cheering big, because obviously a lot of the players on the team are people that American fans are familiar with, and yeah, it would be huge, I think, for FIFA if they did make a run. But obviously it would be if Argentina makes a run.
66 when England last won.
I want to talk quickly, because we've talked about this recently, about the latest in and we've talked about congressional activity in recent episodes, is the latest on the what's now known as the College Football or Protect College Football Sports Act, which was introduced by Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican, and Democratic Senator from the state of Washington, Maria Cantwell. And this is Congress trying to make, their last attempt did not get anywhere. It didn't even come up for votes, but getting some guardrails around what is happening in college sports. And I think it's important that Congress tries to do this to create some balance, create some fairness, create some equity and some logic around this, so it's not state by state, so it's not just the conferences controlling everything, which is kind of the case right now. Of course, right out of the box, the Big Ten and the SEC said, no, it's not, we don't like it. Whereas the ACC and the Big 12 basically said, oh yeah, we're totally supportive of this. Mm-hmm. Now, to their credit, the committees in Congress, or in the Senate at least, said, we're open to chatting with you, and I think the Big Ten and the SEC may just do that. But it certainly shows, because it's a non-starter without that support.
Correct.
And it continues to show just where the power, and this isn't a knock. I went to an ACC school. I'm a fan of the ACC. We've talked about the Big 12 and some of the success that Brett Yormark has had there. And there obviously are other conferences that are represented here. But it just shows you that it's kind of power 2, right? And then the rest.
Yeah, and I haven't been following it closely enough to have a strong opinion. But what I will say in general is, if you really want to save collegiate sports in any form that's even remotely similar to what we have today, and when I say today, I mean actually today with NIL and revenue sharing and things like that, the Big Ten and the SEC are going to have to give up certain things. I don't know what those things are, but they're going to have to give up certain things for the greater good. Otherwise, they break off on their own and they create a power super conference or things like that. And where does that leave the Big 12 and the ACC as, other than as second-class citizens in that scenario?
Well, it will continue to be an interesting one to watch, and a theme that we did hit on last week. And I think this is a fair place. They're obviously very late to the game. We've talked about quite a bit that I don't think either of us have a particular confidence that Congress will get to the right solution, but they are taking on the things that Congress, the legislative branch, should be taking a look at. This and the NFL and the media situation that we talked about last week.
But the important thing is for Congress to not do what they often do, which is grandstand and play to the microphones, play to the masses, rather than trying to seriously legislate something that is in need of legislation.
Yeah, and in a weird way, given what we have today in government here in the U.S., is that it's almost hard for Congress to grandstand as much as they used to, because the grandstanding is taking place elsewhere at such a high level that there's almost no oxygen for it. But sometimes that means they aren't able to get to stuff too, because it all is just priorities, that aren't coming out of priorities based on constituencies.
Yeah. Something that it just came across the ticker, and something that I was afraid was going to happen is happening. There is a Somali referee who was supposed to be the first Somali ever to officiate a World Cup match, was just denied entry to the United States. And you call yourself a FIFA Peace Prize winner. That's exactly the type of thing that I was afraid was going to happen.
Yeah. And who says we're not breaking news on the show? Of course, we're not publishing for 3 more days.
Yeah, but, well,
I don't mean to laugh.
Listen, maybe it'll be resolved by the time this does air. Who knows?
You want to take up one more subject before we take a break and welcome a guest?
Yeah, couple quick hits, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Quick hits. We're about to share some tidbits. Things that didn't make it on the main list. Doesn't mean we think they're not worth a
Stanley Cup, Game 1. 4.8 million viewers. Just ridiculously high number, considering the 2 markets involved. That's one thing. I think that bodes very well for the series, which is now, as we record this.
Yeah.
Vegas is up 2-1.
And these games, these last 2 games have been absolutely insane.
After blowing a 4, I turned on the game the other night. It was 4-0. I was like, all right, I'll watch till the next timeout, and then I'll watch something else. And then, Carolina scores.
Vegas went to completely dominating the game to looking like they weren't even in the NHL, and then bounced back and settled themselves. And it was a 2 OT game. So it was just incredible. I mean, the games have been ridiculous.
Yeah. The other thing I want to shame on ESPN for using AI created images of guys like Tony Parker as part of their package, the NBA Finals. You're telling me the guy who played in the league that many years, you didn't have an archival photo of him that you could use? You had to create an AI image? Come on.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I do want to say a couple of things on a quick hit basis of regarding the NBA. Their Game 1 Knicks Spurs averaged 16.93 million, which is unbelievable. Peaked at 19.6.
That's NFL numbers.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and being on ABC is quite helpful. I do also want to say, I think this broadcast team, particularly Mike Breen, who anyone that follows ESPN, NBA on ESPN, knows Mike Breen. Any Knicks fans know Mike Breen because he calls games locally. The fact that he can be as good as he is calling the Knicks in an NBA Finals and calling it down the middle as well, I think that has to be really, really hard. I also think that Tim Legler has become a pretty good analyst. I've been impressed with him. I'm not so sure that this 3-team broadcast thing in basketball is all that necessary, and I think Jefferson has been the one that hasn't contributed as much. Richard Jefferson, a good player. I know he's had a pretty extended career in this. Legler used to be an analyst, and they brought him into game stuff. I think he's been surprisingly good for my tastes. But again, Breen just make things go.
We grew up and we were fortunate enough to see some of the greatest players of all time in various sports. Michael Jordan in basketball, Wayne Gretzky in hockey, Joe Montana, and later Tom Brady in football, and guys like Derek Jeter and Mike
Tiger.
Schmidt and who? Cal Ripken.
Did you say Tiger in golf or
Tiger in golf? But we are living through the golden age of sports announcers too. You've got Pierre McGuire on hockey calls. You've got Kenny Albert on hockey calls. You've got Mike Breen, who you mentioned. Yeah, I think
agree.
Mike Tirico.
It could be, who knows? I mean, it could be a job down the road that gets taken over by AI or at least
I don't see that.
Yeah, I hope you're right, because I do think that and it's a talent, man. I mean, that's not easy to do.
I have particular respect for hockey announcers, guys like Pierre McGuire and
just
Kenny
amazing.
Albert, to be able to keep up with the pace of play and.
Yeah, even if I knew the game better, and I know the game pretty well, but I'm not an expert. I know basketball way better than I know hockey. I will be the first to admit that. But I don't even know how someone that knows the game inside and out calls that game. It's just such ability, and then obviously a lot of work to be able to capture it the way they do.
Mm-hmm.
But congratulations to everybody involved, because I think the broadcasts have been great, and it's kind of fun to to see these numbers do as well as they are, and it's nice to see the games on. Yes, we'd all probably like them on a little earlier, but it's nice to see them be presented on a network where it has a lot of people have access to. It's been great, and the NBA games have been pretty unbelievable. So even if the Knicks end up winning tonight, they'll be playing tonight and Wednesday night, and if it goes to 5 or 6 or 7, whatever, but I think this series will end up making a lot of people very happy, because I think people are tuned in, not just because the Knicks and New York, which is a huge draw, but the Spurs team is good, and a young star like Victor Wembanyama is a big draw as well.
Mm-hmm. I think San Antonio is going to be very good for years to come.
Yeah, no doubt about that. They're so young. And speaking of teams that are going to be good for a while, because I think both the Knicks and the Knicks seem to have their act together. It was interesting that recently Adam Silver did announce some new anti-tanking rules at the NBA that I think will be serve the league very well. The lottery has been expanded. The teams that are at the very bottom will actually get less chances in that lottery, and the league has given the commissioner a lot of authority to basically call bullshit on teams that are tanking. And that's an interesting bit of power that I think he's been given, because the tanking thing it's been quite obvious and shitty, I think, in the NBA.
Right. We talked about it a few weeks ago. I think the PWHL has a great solution. I don't necessarily know if it's right for the NBA, but the team that does the best after they've been eliminated is rewarded with the top draft pick, which completely discourages tanking.
All right. Let's take a break. Let's do it.
It's time for our guest.
We are back, and we are really pleased to welcome a longtime friend and longtime industry stalwart. Ed Horne is the Chief Operating Officer of On Location, the official hospitality partner for some of the world's premier sports, music, and lifestyle events, not the least of which is the World Cup that has come to North America. Before joining On Location, Ed was the president of 160over90, an integrated marketing agency that oversaw some of the biggest brands in the world. He started his career on the agency side with Clarion Marketing. He did a stop at the NFL and then did over a dozen years at the NHL. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Tim, David, great to see you guys.
So let's get started here, Ed. First question for you. We recently read that On Location had allocated over 500,000 hospitality packages for the World Cup, making it the biggest hospitality program in World Cup history. What was the original goal for this program?
Well, in terms of the demand and where we are, like, we're feeling great about things. So, in terms of some of the numbers that are out there, probably won't necessarily respond directly to you on that, Tim. But what I can say to you is that we had exceeded all of Qatar sales and revenue back in the summer, and the demand has been something that we're really feeling great about. And frankly, as we get a few days from the start of the tournament, we're seeing things just continue that momentum and that acceleration as well. So we're feeling really, really good about it. I mean, this is literally going to be the biggest hospitality opportunity that has ever occurred, and to be in the middle of it is something that On Location and TKO are really proud of.
So at the risk of sounding like a fan rather than a sports industry person, Ed, if someone at this stage with the tournament starting on Thursday still wanted to find a package that includes not just the tickets but kind of the full On Location program, there are some things still available.
There are for certain matches, David, some harder than others, but there is certainly product still available at a variety of different sort of prices and sort of scale, and go to On Location, EXPA.com and buy product if that's something that people are interested in. But it's going to be incredible. I mean, it truly is. 104 matches, 16 cities, 3 countries. It's unbelievable. And listen, you guys have been involved in this industry for a long time as well. Like, to me, these are the moments you sort of got into this business for, is to be able to be part of something that is so epic.
We were saying at the start of the show that the World Cup features 104 matches across Canada, U.S., and Mexico. How many matches will you be attending, if for no other reason just to see all your hard work and your team's hard work come to fruition.
Yeah. So by the way, if we were talking about, Super Bowl or Olympics or whatever, like I'd have a much better answer for you. Here's what my plans are: is I'm on my way to Mexico City for the first match, then I'll be in LA, and then New York, New Jersey, and then we're going to sort of see where things, where the needs are, where the opportunities are. We've got a variety of markets where different clients will be, or different people that are sort of in the industry. So it's very much going to be sort of on an as-needed basis, because again, like it literally could be on the road every day for the next 40 plus days, which is likely how that will happen. But for now, we're sort of leaving it flexible, and the management team here, we're all sort of dividing and conquering.
We also should add that during our lead up to this segment, Ed, we were both basically stating that this is going to be the biggest sporting thing that's ever happened, and that's globally over time. And that's obviously one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, because that's exciting. Now, I say that, but we also want to take advantage of the fact that On Location is involved in a lot of things. But while we have you, you have another big event coming up not too distant future, and that's the LA Olympic Games in 2028. Has the team started planning on that already? Has your team already started planning that, and like to what extent, and what's involved in all of that?
Yeah. So listen, 2026, I'll give you guys a little bit of the way we view the world. So we work with 120 rights holders, properties, over 700 events, and really span the globe. In 2026, in totality, the combination of the Super Bowl in San Francisco, Milan Cortina Olympic Winter Games, and FIFA, essentially this will be the biggest year in sports, hospitality, and tourism that has ever occurred, ever. So when you ask about LA 28, our team really started planning for that in 2021 when the deal initially got done with the IOC. So we've been leapfrogging and sort of planning with a variety of teams across a variety of events. We went on sale in April for LA 28 already. The momentum there is frankly incredibly gratifying, like really, really strong, which just suggests and demonstrates that global events and global opportunities are something that people all still are interested in and want to be part of. And for all of us having been involved in this industry in a long time, live events, communal experiences are still something that people are interested in. So LA 28 is going to be unbelievable. I mean, it truly is. I feel like I'm using lots of accolades and lots of adjectives, but it really is. It's going to be pretty tremendous. And the LA 28 organizing committee is about as good as it possibly can be, and is about as commercially oriented as I think any OCOG has ever been. And from Casey Wasserman to John Slusher to Allison Katz-Mayfield, like the team that's assembled there gives us great anticipation and great confidence in what that's going to be all about.
Is it safe to assume that, given all the events that you've already put on this year, that you're taking those learnings and applying them to LA 2028? I know each event is, unique and individual, and even Milano Cortina, an Olympic Games, is going to be very different than LA. But tell us a little bit about how your team takes those learnings and applies them to future events.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Tim. Like, you learn from all of it. There are learnings that we get from the Super Bowl that have, given us, some guidance and some inspiration for the Olympics. Some of the things we've done in the Olympics, have helped to guide what we'll be doing over the next 40 plus days for the World Cup. But it also expands to what we do at WWE and UFC and and the NCAA and baseball and beyond. So all of it, and that's really where On Location, as sort of truly the global provider and the global leader in this space, it's the ability to be able to treat each event uniquely, because each event is unique, but at the same time be able to use the expertise, the experience, the learnings, the relationships, to be able to deliver the best possible event for those guests at that event.
Ed, you had a long and successful career run at the NHL. Not only are these games in this particular Stanley Cup, which we talked about earlier in the show, been unbelievable, but they're on quite a run there. Is what is going on with the NHL what you would kind of figure your expectations would be, given all the things that are in place from either back when you were there or what you've seen over the last few years?
Yeah. So, by the way, in terms of like worlds colliding, obviously the fact that the NHL was so, present and preeminent in Milan Cortina, right? Obviously, U.S. beating Canada. Those largely were all NHL players. So it all sort of weaves together. And when I was at the NHL, I was at least part of the team that sort of brought the first group of NHL players to the Olympics in Nagano. So it's all sort of intertwined. The answer is, and listen, I'm still a big fan of the NHL, so I'm somewhat biased in this response. I'm not surprised at all. It's such a great game. The management team there is so strong. You've got players now that, sort of are attracting the limelight a little bit more. One of the things that I think hockey has always suffered from is part of what makes it incredible, which is the players are the ultimate team players. They are the most humble athletes. It is all about the team. It is all about the name on the front of jersey, not the name on the back of the jersey. But having said that, now with the new generation of players, the fact that you've got great broadcast coverage on not just a North American but a global basis. I think people are now seeing, the NHL for the incredible entertainment experience that it is. And I mean, think about it. You've got a Stanley Cup final now where you've got Las Vegas and Carolina, right? I mean, I don't know, a dozen years ago or maybe a little bit longer than that, you would have been like, that could never happen. And now the fact that the NHL, can show up anywhere and teams can be competitive anywhere, I think that's just a great testament to, the work that Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and, sort of the team there have done. You
worked through not one, but two work stoppages at the NHL. If Rob Manfred were to call you today, Commissioner of Major League Baseball, who's going through his own labor strife or potential labor strife, how would you advise him?
One is, I'm not sure Rob needs or wants my advice, but but having said that, I'm not a lawyer, but given the experience at the NHL, I sort of got my my honorary degree in labor relations. Here's the thing that I know, speaking from a business standpoint now, right? Not trying to be the lawyer, is at the start of every season, when there is cost certainty, salary cap, every team knows that the fans of every team knows that if they have drafted well, if they are a strong organization, if they've got strong coaching, strong management, strong scouting, that they have a chance. They have a chance to compete. And at the end of the day, that's really what sport or entertainment is all about, right? Which is, you as a fan on that first day of the season are able to say legitimately, this might be the year. When you have wide discrepancy and variances in teams' ability to pay, it draws into question that ability. So, listen, MLB has always had such strong union leadership, right? The union there has always been so strong. And the fact that this may be that moment where, baseball pushes for cost certainty or, sort of a fancy way to say salary cap. If they get that, and if that's where, Rob and team wind up going, they then, for the first time in a long time, have the ability for every fan to believe that they have that chance.
We really appreciate you not ducking that question. That was impressive, because this entire show is built on, offering opinions. And Tim and, as far as Tim and I go, no one's asking for ours, but we're giving them all the time. We're giving everybody advice. That's just what we do.
I'm shocked that you guys are giving your opinions. I'm shocked by that.
But after that response, maybe Rob should call you.
I think so. That was really good. Not surprising, by the way.
No.
Well, we're going to talk about another stop we'd like to ask you about, the agency that you led for a while, for nearly a dozen years. 160/90 recently got sold to Publicis for a pretty nice number, $500 million. You were pretty instrumental in building that. What was your feeling on that? How did that feel to see that agency that you were so instrumental in doing that well in that type of sale to a very large multinational?
It's so gratifying. The build of 160/90 happened over, a relatively fast period of time. If you consider, a dozen plus years or so, sort of, building on, frankly, part of what, Tim had created and others had created, early on. IMG Consulting became Endeavor Global Marketing, became, 160/90. And I think there were a couple things that really helped to sort of lead this success, ultimately success, and then sale of that organization. One was this notion that, sort of all fans are sort of the multi-hyphenate. In the entertainment industry, it's, talent is multi-hyphenate. I think we as an industry have always thought about the consumer like in a really sort of in a box way. they're a sports fan, they're a basketball fan, they're a hockey fan, they're a music fan, as opposed to we're all just people and we all have passions. And the whole premise of building 160/90 and using the WME network, by the way, as sort of the access and the insight there, is we all care about lots of stuff. And that was the notion of a cultural marketing agency, right? So rather than working with brands to build a music strategy or a sports strategy, it was no, what do your consumers care about? And then how do we create programs and leverage partnerships and leverage sponsorships and content and otherwise to build ideas and opportunities that connect with consumers where they are. And that to me was, sounds like a bunch of marketing talk, but really was the differentiator of 160. And, and I think that's ultimately what the industry responded to in terms of 160 sort of, being a valuable asset that others coveted.
Ed, we know how busy you are, but we do have 2 more questions we'd like to take you through before we let you go. 2 questions we ask all our guests. The first one is,
where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
So I was a hockey guy growing up, hockey kid. I played the game, up through college. I wasn't very good, but I played through college. And I began officiating, refereeing hockey. I worked kids games and then high school games and ultimately college games and junior games and minor league pro hockey. And I actually worked in Olympics. So I was an on-ice official at the Olympics. And it was while I was at the Olympics and I had this all-access credential, which to this day, I think they made a mistake. They let me go too many places, where I began to see that there were companies and brands that were using, in that case, the Olympics, to do something, to drive business. I didn't know enough at that time to understand what it was all about, but I use it as the opportunity to just barge into discussions and ask questions and sort of better understand what that was all about. So while I had aspirations of making, NHL refereeing a long-term potential, ultimately I realized that, hey, there's something else I want to do here. And I used that experience as sort of the jumping off point for me to get into the agency business, where sponsorships and partnerships and sports and all of that mattered. And that was, sort of my aha moment, if you will, that there was a way to combine a passion for sports, in that case, with, business and put those 2 together.
That's great. I saw David's eyes get as big as mine did. We had no idea that you were an Olympic hockey official. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
That's certainly a first
now,
on.
guys. Long time
yeah,
ago
still,
now.
but it's a first for this show.
Yeah.
Last question: what one piece of advice would you give to a young person looking to break into the industry?
So what's interesting about that, and I think you guys will appreciate this, and this is a different answer than maybe it would have been, at some other point in time, but it starts with just work hard, work hard, bring a relentless work ethic. Yes, you need to be smart and sure, you need to bring some good strategic thinking, and yes, you need to understand technology and AI and the media business and all of that. Sure, you need all of that. But if you work hard and you demonstrate that you are somebody that can be irreplaceable in an organization, good things can happen. And I know how simple that sounds, but I really believe that, especially, some of the dynamics of sort of the workplace these days, a work ethic is actually a differentiator. And I see lots of young kids, young executives that are bringing that I can just see the success that they're going to have.
That's great.
Great.
Ed, thank you again for coming on. You're never not busy, but this week in particular, we are so appreciative that you took time out of your schedule to talk to us. We want to wish you the best of luck in the upcoming tournament. Safe travels. Hopefully you can take a breath and enjoy some great football for at least a couple of minutes in each match, although that's probably going to be hard for you to do. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, you bet, guys. Great to see you, and hopefully we'll see you at some point soon again.
Safe travels. We are back. Thank you again to our guest, Ed Horne, Chief Operating Officer of On Location. Boy, they have had some success this year, running the biggest hospitality programs in the U.S. and beyond. So now is the time in the show where we give shout-outs, make corrections, talk about what we're looking forward to. David, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to say that was having Ed this week, given World Cup kickoff, was quite awesome. And you're right, what they've done in terms of establishing themselves in that space has been pretty remarkable. I just feel like I need to do a quick follow-up because I'm not going to say I jinxed it, but after we came out of last week's show and I kind of had that, like last hope of somehow the Bears staying in Illinois and hopefully maybe even in Chicago, they, of course, announced a few days ago that they were pursuing, or they were going to, formally be exploring the Hammond, Indiana site. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily done. They have to find the exact location. But it's disappointing, obviously. But they're getting offered $1 billion in taxpayer funding for construction and infrastructure, and they weren't getting anywhere like that. In fact, they weren't getting anything. They had nothing really from the Illinois side. And they do what owners do, and I guess I can't necessarily blame them. We'll see. It still obviously has to get signed. Disappointing from a fan standpoint, but not surprising. I just needed to follow up on that because I was being an idiot last week. Quick on Liv, a story came out in Front Office Sports this morning that they may not even get through this season. It'll be an interesting one to follow over the next few bits, and whether some of the tournaments get canceled. They're trying to cut back on spending. Anything that's discretionary, if you will, is being pulled. The problem with that is that Liv model was based on spending a lot. Like, it really required them to have all this pomp and circumstance and the big name signed and all that stuff. So we'll see how that affects what they do moving forward. Obviously, they're going out for investors. And then in addition to World Cup and everything else, the UFC Freedom 250 will take place, which is a TKO event. Of course, On Location is owned by TKO. And that is falling, I think, on Sunday, the 14th, if yes, I'm right on that.
Flag Day.
And there are 2 residents bringing a lawsuit. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but they're trying to stop it, saying that they couldn't have even built that. The problem with this is that, we've known about this for months. This lawsuit is just coming up. My gut is it's not going to go anywhere, and this thing is going to happen.
I tend to agree. I think it's much more likely that the thing is going to be stopped by thunderstorm, which is what they're calling for right now. Than nothing like putting up a huge metal structure in the middle of a thunderstorm.
Yeah, I want to fight under that.
One of those times I'd be happy I was of average height at best.
Right. What about you?
I want to preface this by saying this is not an apology, but a subject that we have not touched upon in quite some time, but used to hit upon quite frequently, pickleball. The number of pickleball players from 2020 to 2025 increased by 5-fold, and there are apparently like 24 million pickleball players in the United States now, and valuations are going up. I think what bodes well for the sport is that it is aging down, because back when I was privy to some research into one of the pickleball properties, pickleball players were older and whiter than you and me. And that's hard to do with sport in our lives. But I do still think that it has peaked, and whether or not it's plateaued or will decline at some point remains to be seen. But it has grown, albeit off a very small base, but 25 million people who claim to play pickleball. And who would lie and admit to playing pickleball?
Yeah, I had someone just this weekend say, because I was saying that, Karen and I we're thinking about starting to try to play tennis because we both love the game of tennis. Mm-hmm. And this person I was speaking with was like, but you should do pickleball.
Don't play tennis.
And I basically just got up and walked away. I had no interest in having a conversation with that person anymore.
No. Yeah, Karen should not be playing pickleball.
No.
Karen should be playing tennis.
Yes.
And then, like many fellow New Yorkers, I will just close out by saying, go New York, go. It's going to be a big game tonight. I think it is unrealistic to expect the Knicks to sweep, but April 23rd was the last time they lost a game, so anything is possible. I read a statistic that they expect to bring in $145 million in revenue from this playoff run. But think about the game. They have foregone, because they have swept the last 2 series, they've foregone at least 3, maybe 4 dates.
Yeah.
Had those series gone longer.
And I did hear there was some pressure downward on the tickets because of the craziness that is going to be going on at the Garden tonight with the president and mayor both going to be on hand there, which is checked a whole new security situation. Which can't
the security is going to be ridiculous. People are going to be pissed about that more than anything else, regardless of what their political leanings might be. But these people who are complaining that the ticket prices are too high, welcome to capitalism, right? It's you sit down in Econ 101 and the first concept you learn is supply and demand. And you've got, 18,000 seats or whatever it is, and you've got 18 million people who'd like to go. That's why you get 6 and sometimes, in some cases, 7-figure ticket prices.
Someone's willing to pay it.
Yep. Anyway, at that nice ending, we will say thank you once again to Ed Horne. Thank you, David, as always. Most of all, thank you to our listeners. Smash that like button, that follow, that subscribe button, comment. You can find us anywhere you find your podcast, but you can always go to dpandmcgee.com. So until next week, he's DP, I'm McGee, and we will talk soon.
Next to